Pleasure to see you again.
Congressman, what's the status of the coronavirus in the state of Nebraska right now?
Well, we're very fortunate in Nebraska in that this larger wave has not hit us. We're out here on the frontier and we're spread out, and even our urban areas aren't that dense. But honestly, we've got a very compliant citizenry. We've got excellent healthcare facilities. The decisions that are being made about how to manage the public health are in concert with the University of Nebraska Medical Center, which has played a lead role in trying to fight the virus nationally. So it's traumatic, no doubt about it. The negative economic multipliers of particularly the impact on small business is really severe. But I'll have to tell you, over the weekend, I got a text from a friend of mine who's in the travel business, former University of Nebraska football player. He got the PPP loan, the Payment Protection Program loan, and he wants to have a ribbon cutting via Zoom this week to reopen his business. So there's some signs out there that people are trying to be optimistic and work through this, as traumatic as it is. Would you like to be a part of that Zoom ribbon cutting? I think that'd be fun.
I might like to be it. It's interesting to see how the very different businesses are responding to this, which brings me to the question of the stimulus bill. There's a possibility of a fourth one, stimulus bill, and there's been some battle in Congress between Republicans and Democrats. The Democrats blocked one last week, but that's because they want $250 billion for health care facilities, as well as small local, state and local governments that are suffering tremendously. So where do you stand on this?
Well, the reality is we probably have to do a fourth bill fairly quickly. The small business component of this, again, is essential. This is really about three things. It's about protecting healthcare infrastructure, individuals and families, and small business. The checks are rolling out this week. People with direct deposit should be getting their individual checks of up to $1,200 this week. Our healthcare facilities last week, SEMA Pharma suggested that we were going to receive about $30 billion of the $100 billion allocated. So that's rolling this past week. And then finally, the Paycheck Protection Program, that loan, that portion of which is forgivable if people get reemployed, is rolling out now. So letting those things take effect are important, but that PPP program, Paycheck Protection, is probably going to run out of money. We need to bolster it. State and local governments have been asking as well for relief, and that's important. The Treasury Secretary told us last week that he set up a separate facility for borrowing, but I wouldn't be opposed to having something in the bill, obviously, that's targeted state and local governments, because, again, the negative multipliers are affecting them. It's no fault of their own. We've got very good cooperation here, by the way, in Nebraska between state and local and the federal delegation. So it just needs to stay away from politics. I mean, the nation wants to, I guess, be in solidarity, if you will, through this national time of suffering. The last thing they want to see is people jockeying for position and providing funding for things that do not matter in an emergency. We can go back to those typical fights later, but let's get through this, get people well, get our economic well-being reset.
But you say that, I mean, obviously politics shouldn't play a role in it, but if in all these bills, if you look for perfection, the bills aren't going to get passed. You weigh it against sort of the urgency, and, there's going to be some stuff put in bills that people aren't going to like, but you don't want to hold up a bill where it has good things in it for people who desperately need help now.
Well, that honestly is my perspective. In any government program, there's going to be slippage, and one that's an emergency like this where you have to throw unbelievable, unprecedented amounts of resources at a problem where there was not a clear roadmap to fix it. Again, bolstering the healthcare sector, helping small businesses and individuals and families are the three legs to this stool. But there's going to be some things that sneak in there that are going to be distasteful, and it's going to be always controversial. Look, I had a Nebraskan write to me, for instance, the Kennedy Center got money in the bill, again, some kind of last-second compromise or something, and it got in there. He said, hey, can I have free tickets? So people are reacting with good humor in that regard. But we need to focus explicitly on the emergency and the emergency only, and not let other political or ideological agendas creep in there. But you're going to inevitably have some of that. It's the nature of a compromised system.
And just for further explanation, that Kennedy Center is a performing arts center here in Washington D.C., which has had some controversy since it got about $25 million. But my thought on all this is that if we have full transparency from Congress as to who put what in, how much, and why, is that that it will be accountable at the polls in November. And in the meantime, maybe have less perfect bills passed to get out and help people.
Well, the majority of this bill is the vast majority of what has gone previously has gone to fight the disease, cure people, buy us time so our healthcare system is not overrun like it was in Italy and other places, move money directly to individuals and families, and keep small business alive. That's the key variable here, to get our country well and at the same time build a bridge of sustainability for small business viability, avoiding big bailout scenarios and all of that. In the meanwhile, again, the nature of moving things fast in Washington, things are going to be in there that none of us particularly like, but if it's minimized and kept to the margins, the major initiative here should be helpful to the country. Let's fight those ideological battles later. It has no place in these bills, but there's going to be some seepage. There's just this reality of the nature of the system, sadly.
What's sort of interesting is that Nebraska, which is they're certainly not immune from this virus. This virus doesn't discriminate, but you're not hit as hard, obviously, as South Louisiana or New York or some other urban areas. And in spite of that, the University of Nebraska has been a trailblazer when it's come to viruses. Very, very involved in fighting the Ebola virus. So tell me, what's going on at the University of Nebraska's medical facility?
Yes, we have a long history of infrastructure partnerships with the federal government to fight infectious disease. We played a lead role in the Ebola epidemic. Again, I've worked very actively with the university to position their virological sectors to actively be a part of our national healthcare security, if you will, which has huge implications for our national defense and security as well. So I'm proud of what they've done. Early when the coronavirus was first being understood, you recall people were being offloaded from the cruise ship. They came to Nebraska first. Those who were suspected of having gotten exposed to the disease, and we welcomed them. They stayed at a National Guard base in my congressional district, and then those who were sick were put into isolation and containment units. We have that infrastructure here, as well as the deep academic experience to play a key role in trying to understand the virus. They're working on a particular treatment regimen now, one of the various that are out there. My whole push has been to try to position the state for very aggressive, rapid testing. This is the key variable to getting people back to work, finding out who has it, who doesn't, and then the new test, which determines whether or not the antibody is present, whether a person actually may have been exposed with no symptoms, but now has the antibody, is immune. And that's the devastating part of this disease. Humanity had no natural immunity to it, but some people have been exposed and never got sick. So the 1-2 type of tests that are coming out rapidly, hopefully, I'd like to see scaled up by manufacturers across the country. And Nebraska takes a lead role in both public-private partnership, maybe with the university coordinating this. And so they've played an extraordinary role, again, in contributing to the country's understanding of public policy in this regard, helping people with treatments, doing the research, as well as providing, hopefully, the next step of leadership in, again, this testing dynamic. Again, that's the key variable to understanding.
The good news is the FDA approved about 2 weeks ago to roll out some kits to determine whether or not someone had the coronavirus and would actually have the antibodies. Everyone's very hopeful that this is going to be a success and roll out, because that will, of course, empower us to open our economy faster. Let me turn to the question of World Health Organization. Did they let us down? Did it fail? Has it been too much partnership with China? What's your view on WHO?
Too much partnership with China. I mean, I read what you read. I haven't spoken with them directly, but when you have a multilateral international institution like that, that is basically commending China for its efforts, as I've read, you have a real problem. China was more interested in controlling information than controlling the disease itself. It's my understanding the origins of this they're still not forthcoming about it. Could it have been created in a lab and then leaked out or something like that? Or is it the natural wet market animal to human virus transfer that took place in one of these more primitive types of markets. Answers to those questions would be helpful, as well as the molecular structure, the earlier manifestation.
How do you get those answers? I mean, because that is an important answer, because there's some people in this country, keep emailing me like, was this in the natural wet market, or was this a lab? Is this a weapon?
Why don't you have the head of the WHO in your program? Pressure them. Yeah. These are important questions. Look, I'm what's called a ranking member of the Agriculture Subcommittee on Appropriations. We actually have oversight authority over the Food and Drug Administration. Before even this happened, it was clear that we were way too over-dependent on our drug supply and drug ingredient supply in China, as well as our medical equipment. Not to divert from the core of your question, but this is a whole other area of public policy that has to be unpacked. This is a matter of national security. Just like we make our medical equipment, or rather our military equipment here in America, we ought to be making our medical equipment here in America and not be so dependent upon international organizations like the WHO that seem to be beholden to China and seem to be very soft and mild in their critique of them, or not at all.
How do we reverse that medical supply equipment? I mean, and how fast can we do it so that we're making here in the United States? Because people are looking for masks, they're looking for all sorts of equipment.
Well, I think I don't know how fast we're going to be able to do it. Obviously, ramping up manufacturing here, and then with some prodding and leadership from Congress and the executive branch, that this is going to be a national strategy moving forward. That we are not going to be dependent on other places for this type of supply, particularly our drugs, which we cannot absolutely guarantee are safe. Those days are over. If I was the CEO of Big Pharma, I'd be on notice right now. You ought to be thinking about bringing your stuff home, right back to America.
What would be sort of if you were back in Washington right now, we're all sort of paralyzed in terms of we can't move, we can't travel, it's very difficult. But if you could hold a hearing right now, what would be the hearing you'd like to hold, and who would you like to call?
I'd like to see the state of the scale of our testing. Again, this is up to the private sector in coordination with some centralized efforts at the federal government. But I think the rollout, the scalability of wide-scale testing as quickly as we can, made in America type of testing, so that we're absolutely assured of its efficacy. There's some problem out there now where a certain test coming from overseas, maybe even China, may not be reliable. There are tests being made in America. Those need to be portioned out on a wide scale, and we need an understanding exactly as to where we are in terms of the manufacturing of those things, because you've got a bit of a conflict here. We have a decentralized system of government, particularly in emergencies and healthcare, and a certain centralization of national policy as well. So governors and even down to health departments and mayors are scrambling to find their own equipment and such, while at the same time being in coordination with the Federal Emergency Management Agency. I'd just like to find out the scale of testing, because again, that's the key barrier, especially to find out who has already been exposed and then can't get it anymore. That's the key to getting us back to work, to making sure that our frontline responders are healthy, our nurses and doctors who are fighting this valiantly can go back to work. And then we move business sectors into the testing so that they can get back to work as well. That, and then the second hearing I would have, again, how do we make our medical supplies and drugs in America? That's coming. That needs to happen. We're not going to be dependent on China anymore for this.
How did that happen that we got so dependent on China?
Profiteering by multinational corporations.
Have you been working with the White House at all? And are they answering questions you might have that in terms of representing the people of Nebraska?
Yes, we had a very good conference call last week with the Vice President, led by the Vice President. There are multiple contacts that I have. I was on the phone with Dr. Stephen Hahn, the Commissioner of the Federal Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, who the President was very commending of week before last, working tirelessly on this. Again, I've done several telephone town meetings to my constituents with the head of the University of Nebraska Med School. Small Business Administration has been very responsive. I have their direct text. Whenever a bank has a problem, we try to get it immediately to them. It's not without problems. Obviously, rolling out something this massive is going to have a lot of wrinkles. But we're here. We're trying to help our constituents one by one. I keep telling people, if you're stuck, you have a problem, let us know. And then we try to get it to Washington as best we can. Look, there are clearly areas of the country that have to be prioritized in terms of the massive federal intervention. New York and California, and some of the dense urban areas like New Orleans, Detroit, Philadelphia. But out here, again, on the frontier where we've got less of an impact, we're working hard, we're trying to be diligent, compliant citizenry, but we're also trying to play a key role in the national solution of this. Testing, using our local healthcare infrastructure. The University of Nebraska, in my mind, is key to getting us back rebounded as quickly as possible. I'd like to see Nebraska lead the way in that regard.
Congressman, thank you very much. And I have followed how much Nebraska has done on viruses over the years, and it is, it's been quite extraordinary what the university has done to help on so many of these viruses.
I'm proud of their efforts. They're true public servants, and they've really stepped up tirelessly. They're exhausting themselves to try to help our country. Thank you very much.
Congressman, thank you very much for joining me.